Hi there, my name is Raelan, and I have an incredible interview for you today. It's with someone named Phil Hadfield. He's over in London, England, and although he's not yet fully recovered, he's still very much on his chronic illness journey. He has a fascinating story to tell. He has tried more things than I think anyone else I've ever talked to, more than I ever tried, and that says a lot, because all of us, we try a lot of stuff. So he talks about lots of the different things that he's done, including all these like crazy retreats in different countries and ayahuasca and different programs, and shares his experience and the ones that for him personally he has found to be helpful and he thinks have had the most value for him. And if you are enjoying these interviews and you haven't yet subscribed, I invite you to subscribe. I have interviews coming up on my channel here in the next couple of months with different doctors, specialists talking about how to do return to work plans, many more full recovery stories, just lots of really incredible things. So I invite you to subscribe. It will make sure that you don't miss anything coming up. It will make me happy and it will make the YouTube algorithm happy. It will put these videos in front of more people who might need this information or a little bit of hope and inspiration. Hey Phil, so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me on. Much appreciated. Yeah. Take it easy on me.
It's always a bit weird, isn't it, when you're used to being the one who's doing the interview to suddenly be on the other end of it.
This is super weird. I'm a little bit worried about the one that I'm going to be doing all the talking. So cut me off if I ramble too much.
All right, so here obviously to talk a bit about your health journey, what that's been like, where you are now with things. So can you tell us a bit of that, how it started? Or, I always like hearing what life was like before this all started, what kind of led up to it.
Before any sort of health condition, I was, I guess, what was classed to be fit and healthy. I pushed myself in every area of my life. I was always super sporty. I, always played in the football team. I would be, playing football twice a week. I'd be in the gym. I would be pushing myself in from a social aspect. I'd be going out a lot, probably drinking too much. I always said that my body would be incredibly confused because I'd be, so healthy in one respect, like being all sporty. And then in another respect, I'd be, binge drinking and going out and doing all kinds of things. So that's probably, an indicator of what was to come in terms of my health conditions. But I was a happy, positive person. I'd left university and decided to take 2 years out actually, because I needed a year out to save money and a year out to go traveling. And part of that traveling was living in Australia. So I was in Australia and one day I noticed I had this pain around my groin area, and I looked down and it was a tick bite. And at the time I didn't have a clue that's what it was. My lymph nodes started to swell up. I started to get a lot of aching. I didn't bother going to the doctor. And eventually when I did go to the doctor, you couldn't see anything. So they just kind of assumed I was being a bit crazy. And so the look of it had gone away. Like you couldn't see anything, but it's still, the aching and the pain still persisted. And then after about 2 months, I started to get neurological symptoms. I started to get pins and needles. I started to get weird sensations in my neck and my skull, and then like muscle weakness and just all kinds of like weird kind of worrying symptoms. And I got back to the UK about 5 months later, saw a neurologist. He told me I was fine, pretty much looked me up and down and told me I was fine, and then said that, this will go away. And luckily enough, by the end of that year, it pretty much gone away. And so for the next, I was 23 at the time. And for the next 5 years, life, was pretty normal. But every now and then I would have these weird neurological episodes and things wouldn't be quite right. And my joints were like gradually getting worse, but you kind of just told every single time I went to a doctor that, they kind of indicated that, this is what happens when you get a bit older. And I was like, I'm 25, 26, probably shouldn't be happening because it wasn't impacting me on a daily basis. I didn't really take it that seriously. And so that was kind of like the first part of my health journey. And then it started when I was 28, it started to to get a lot worse.
Every time I ask this question of people, I feel a bit bad. So I'm like, oh, great. Tell me about years of your life with all of this stuff, but could you like sum it up in maybe like 3 minutes? And I feel like it's a lot to try and cover.
I was just say the first part of that, I guess, was almost like the lead up to the part that's been the most difficult. So yeah, I just want to preface this with, I've been treating myself pretty badly throughout my 20s in terms of like partying, working really hard, working 12-hour days, going out all weekend. So I probably wasn't treating myself so well. So it's probably inevitable that something was going to come up. And I was on a holiday, a vacation with some of my friends in Croatia, 2014. And on this holiday, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, I think. Everything that I'd been doing throughout my 20s, I think, just came to a head, and I just started to develop every symptom under the sun. So all of my joints, like feeling completely arthritic, like aching, muscle twitching, nerve issues, issues with my vision, tinnitus ringing in my ears, aching glands, muscle weakness, I think said muscle twitching, extreme fatigue, and all of this stuff started on that holiday. And when I got back, over the course of the next 2 weeks just started to get worse and worse and worse. And I went to see a neurologist and loads of other doctors, and I had test after test done, and they all came back clear. I was this perfect picture of perfect health. I looked fine. My tests were fine. So they just made me think I was crazy. And at the time I was going through this all on my own. I didn't really want to tell anyone because, for everyone else could see I was completely healthy. And it got to the point where by the end of that year, I'd been to see so many doctors. They sent me to someone who was basically a psychiatrist and told me that I had health anxiety and that I needed antidepressants, and actually put me on a course of antidepressants for a couple of months, which I took. And then after about 2 months, I was just like, this is insane. I'm not depressed. There's something wrong with me. And at that point, and that was about a year after, so in 2015, about a year after things had got really bad. And so I started to think about things a bit more logically and started to look into Lyme disease a lot more, because of the initial tick bite. But it's worth saying that I'd already been tested for Lyme disease and had been told by numerous doctors that I couldn't have it because it doesn't exist in Australia, which is a load of crap. For those of you living in Australia, you probably know what I'm talking about. And so I went and through my own money, I went and got tested in Germany, and it came back. I actually tested negative for Lyme, but I had incredibly chronically low CD57, which is your natural killer cells, which showed that something like Borrelia or Lyme was attacking my system. And I had active Epstein-Barr virus, a lot of other herpes viruses. I had parasites, I had heavy metals, I had all of these things. So initially I stupidly went down the route of intravenous antibiotics, and then that just made me worse. And then over the course of the next number of years, and it's difficult, and apologies if I'm going on back and forward, I've done so many things and seen so many people. I then started to go down more of the holistic route and started to then go on loads of different protocols and so many different diets, so many weird and wacky treatments. Just, I've tried to do absolutely everything, and really, nothing helped. But in the last year, I found out, which is a big piece of the pie, a big piece of the puzzle, not the pie, was I've got really high levels of toxic mold, mycotoxins. For those of you who don't know, that, if you've lived in a building that has water damage, then it's likely that you could be having some kind of issue with mold toxicity or mycotoxins. And living in England, we live in a damp, moldy environment, and we quite often live in old places. And I remember growing up, I had a damp patch above my bed, like for quite a lot of my life, in the apartment that I owned. Constant leaks through the roof. So I had my place tested, and it's just rife with mold. So that was a huge piece of the puzzle that I found out last year. And since that point, I'm working on a number of new protocols, and I'm more positive than ever that, I'm going down the right route. I think it's probably worth mentioning that a couple of years ago, I started to focus a lot more on mindset. And whilst physical side of things hadn't improved, my mindset improved vastly. And today I'm in a far, far better place, and so much more of a positive place. And whilst I'm not recovered physically, I have no doubt in my mind that will happen, and I will get there. And it's just a matter of time. And it's a matter of when, not if.
I'm curious about a lot of the internal stuff. Like, what were you thinking through all of this when it first started happening, or when they told you were depressed? Like, did you have any? Yeah. What were your thoughts?
I felt like I was living a double life. I would. On the outside, I looked totally fine, and I was going to work. I was performing at work. I was still forcing myself to, push myself in exercise. I wasn't telling anyone about what was going on. And yet I was constantly worried about what was happening. And the thoughts I was having was, really kind of a bit of self-pity, like seeing myself as the victim. Why me? Why is this happening to me? And then it's like, will I always be like this? And then you go down the Google and the Facebook route, and you start to, when you type in your symptoms, I mean, the amount of times I typed in my symptoms and convinced myself I had, these things that were going to get me in a wheelchair, and just that my life was over. And the bad thing about that, those doing those things back then, I think that started to condition me to believe in a certain way. And I've now, really spending the last couple of years trying to uncondition those thoughts, and those beliefs that, I will get better. And there's, those dark times are more of a choice as opposed to something I have to deal with. Yeah, I think that was it mainly. I was just really scared, really lonely, and felt a bit fake because I was putting on this facade that I was fine, and I definitely wasn't.
It's a horrible place to be in, isn't it? When you have these serious medical, physical, mental symptoms, cognitive symptoms, but no one's giving you any label, no one's giving you anything that is recognized. So you have nothing to tell people. And so many of us seem to get in this place where we just, like, okay, I just have to pretend I'm fine, or I risk telling people and they're just going to think I'm crazy or lazy or making this up, or it's tough.
Well, you nailed it. Yeah. Like even now when I tell people mold, and they look at me and they're just a bit like, that doesn't, you can tell. And I get it because, I only know about it because I have to know about it. But, and when I first started to understand a little bit more about what was going on, a doctor would tell me it was the viruses that was making me ill. So I'd tell people, it was to do with viruses, and then I would tell there was Lyme disease, and then people would be like, well, what is going on with you? And the biggest question I get asked is just like, are you still not feeling better? And it just every time it like, and are all these things you're doing, are they, are they not helping? And it's just like you get so frustrated with it. But in recent years I've just realized that I probably would be the exact same as them, and it's more down to a lack of understanding on their behalf, and also a lack of understanding on my side that they're not going through it. But yeah, that desperation to get a label on it, something that it's almost like, if you have a cancer, and I don't want to downplay anything like that. Cancer is so serious, and MS and stuff like that, because it's more mainstream, people can immediately connect with it emotionally and they get it. Whereas with stuff like chronic fatigue, as and Lyme disease and stuff like that, people can't connect with it. And because you look fine, you look healthy, people can't connect with it even more so. Yeah.
And did you ever feel, when you're talking, I was thinking, sometimes I think there's some of us feel a pressure to tell people that we're getting better, or because I think people want to hear that, and we want to be positive, and we don't want to be that downer in every conversation. So I don't know. I used to find that I would tell people that things were getting better, I was improving, even when I wasn't. And I don't even think I realized that I was purposely lying. I was just in the moment trying to give people what they wanted.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely. I think I would always, because I would try and I would go and do these outlandish, crazy things that I would have to tell people about because I was leaving the country, or my diet was so weird that they couldn't not know about it. So then after it, they'd go, "Oh, how are you feeling?" And I'd always just say, "Oh, I'm feeling a little bit better, but these things take time." And deep down, I'm just like, "Oh, I feel exactly the same, or I feel worse." And so, yeah, incredibly frustrating.
And I think, I don't know about you, but for me, I could start to even convince myself, which could be a good thing, because yes, it's good to have an optimistic outlook about your health. But for me, it actually caused me some problems, because it was like I had these blinders on and I just kept saying I was getting better when I wasn't. And then, so I wasn't addressing the fact that the things that I was doing to recover weren't working, because I kept saying I'm getting better. And I needed just to be honest, just like, wait, stop. I'm not getting better. Let's, I gotta look at things. So yeah, I think it's a fine line, that optimism and that positivity, and then, but also, being honest with yourself.
It is a fine line, because I think I actually probably have the other problem that I'll be like a week into a protocol and I'll be like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit better. And then I'll be like, it must be working. And then the day after, I'll feel like crap, and I'll immediately think this isn't going to work. I've got this, there's that voice, we all know that voice that's, that self-doubt. And it's just like, this isn't going to work. It's going to be like all the other times. And so I think mentally I start to give up on things earlier, while physically I'm still doing them. Mentally, that belief starts to wane. And that's something I massively need to improve upon, because you need to have a deep down belief that it's going to work, what you're doing. And that's something I have to work on.
Yeah, you're right. That is the other side of it. Yeah. And I imagine most of us can relate to that as well. It's hard to get your hopes up over and over again. And it's also probably a protective mechanism that kicks in, like, all right, I can, the first sign it's not working, let's stop being invested in this one. I'm curious. Yeah. I'm asking more for people watching, because I actually don't care so much about diagnoses anymore. I don't, for me, think they're super important with some things, like whether it's ME or CFS or, I don't know, fibromyalgia or POTS or Lyme disease, or, this is just me. Take it for what it is. My own thoughts is that it's just, it seems like the way out of it, there isn't a recognized treatment protocol for many of these things. So, but I'm curious for you, did you ever receive any of these diagnoses, or what did that look like?
Yeah. So, I got like a kind of like a clinical diagnosis of Lyme initially, but it was more of a, we don't know what's going on with you. We can see these viruses, we can see these parasites, we can see something's there. So we're going to slap the Lyme label on you. But more recently, the practitioner I'm working with at the moment, she's given me she said, you've got a biotoxin illness. With, like with a lot of people who've got chronic health issues, you've not got one thing, you've got all the things, which is, quite often someone's not just got Lyme, someone's not just got mold, someone's not just got parasites, they've got all of them. And that's because there's something systemically wrong with their immune system. And so, for me, it's a biotoxin illness describes it very well, because I think, the environment that I've lived in, but then also the toxic thoughts and stuff. And I don't want people to think that I'm this like incredibly negative person, but I think quite a lot of people who have chronic health issues, they're very, let's say, mind busy and on the go and pushing themselves. And so we're often find it very difficult to settle down. And I feel like I've been in fight or flight for years. And I think that in itself is an external toxin.
It's interesting. I think virtually every person that I've interviewed on this channel has said some version of that, always on the go, fight or flight, wasn't chronically stressed, not relaxed, not, it's all just anecdotal, but it seems hard to ignore that we all had, so many of us had this leading up to this. It's just... which to me speaks really loudly to the fact that we need to address that when we're healing, our stress, our mental health, our nervous system, and all of that. That's, to me anyways, what I take from this.
No, definitely. And I think people, what I think is really interesting is through doing my podcast, is that when I speak to people, I realize that someone who's come on and said they've got fibromyalgia, if they'd gone to a different doctor, they could have been given the Lyme tag, or they could have been given the chronic fatigue tag. They're all in the same kind of family, and actually I think probably one of the worst things you can do, I believe anyway, is really cling to a label for it, because then you start to really identify with it. I don't know, when people call themselves Limeys, and you get these people who, I get it, there's a sense of community and stuff, but before you know it, you are that condition. And for me, I don't ever want to be that condition. I craved that diagnosis so much at one point, and now I more just want to I realize that I've got an issue and I want to sort it out, but I don't want it to be me. I don't want it to be my identity.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous when things become a part of our identity. It can be quite hard to put it down, and it's understandable how it happens. And I get also, because, we were just saying, society gives us more credibility for what we're going through, or more understanding if we have a label for it. So it's a weird thing to try and balance. But if you embrace, I make comments like, if your Instagram handle is, chronically ill Elizabeth, like it's probably not good for your recovery journey. Like you really need to be careful what you're internalizing and how much of who you are you're making this, because there's a lot of a mental component to it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And I think there's people who are chronically ill, they tend to, I just don't want to bash any of these accounts. That you see these accounts where they are constantly putting out fairly negative messages saying about how badly they feel, and they get loads more engagement than the ones that are positive, saying you can get through this, you can get over this. And that says a lot about what when someone's in a really in the depths of chronic illness, they feed upon that negativity, and they cling to it. And so I think that's all involved with people identifying with it. And I just wish it could be the other way around, and that people would cling to the positivity and focus on that a lot more. It's definitely what I'm trying to do, and definitely is helping me.
That's such a good point. I'm so glad you brought that up. I'd never really thought about it that way before. But yeah, when we do put out, really negative kind of posts, we get a lot more attention for it and a lot more support. So it feeds that behavior. So it makes sense. And plus, when you're going through hell, it's understandable if you're in a negative state and you're not, it takes work to be, optimistic. And I don't, there's the whole toxic positivity thing. And I don't want to imply that we need to pretend everything's okay all of the time. No. I think there's a difference between that and optimism and hope. I'm curious, because when you're talking about your journey, you said you've tried all these different things with your recovery. What are some of the things that you've tried? I
thought you might ask me this, because I wanted to think about it beforehand, because there's just been so many. I just think initially, I've been on so many different protocols, so many. I mean, I've got a whole chemist of supplements in my bathroom. It's ridiculous. I've been on so many different diets: vegan, vegetarian, paleo, autoimmune protocol. I did a month raw fruit and veg diet. I did 3 months eating steak only on a carnivore diet. I've seen so many physios, osteopaths, reflexology, acupuncture, cranial sacral therapy. I've done all kinds of things, energy healing, mental things. And then I guess that those would be things that I would just be I would be speaking to someone and they'd say, have you ever tried this? And I'd look it up and I'd go down this rabbit hole and I'd book in an appointment with someone online. So, have you ever thought of this thing where you inject it in your joints and it should help your joints? I'll try that. And some of the bigger things I've done, initially I did a month's worth of antibiotics, intravenous antibiotics in Germany. I then did 3 weeks in India doing this thing called panchakarma, which is a extreme detox thing, and it was not an enjoyable experience. I would recommend it, but not in India. It was very uncomfortable. I didn't enjoy it. Maybe if you're keen on more of the rustic environment, but it was I remember on the first night I had a rat in my room, so I wasn't too keen on that. I did a week of in Florida with this kinesiologist. I did a 3-week water fast in California, and I'm trying to think what else. I did 3-week stem cell treatment in Germany. I did 1-week stem cell treatment in Arizona, and then more recently I did a 3-week ayahuasca retreat in Mexico, and then actually only last month I did a 1-week retreat with Joe Dispenza in Mexico. And I guess what I say all of these things because I just want to show that I think my approach has been really scattergun. When I look at it, like a lot of those things weren't because I knew there was something wrong with my immune system, and I knew that some of those things could help my immune system, and I just went and tried them because I was desperate. But actually the more recent things I've tried to do have been more in alignment with my overall recovery and getting better, particularly, the ayahuasca retreat and the Joe Dispenza stuff that I've done more recently. So, there's a lot there.
That is crazy, Phil. Not crazy. I don't mean any judgment with that. Just you want to talk crazy? I kind of pride myself in my long list of things that I don't know why, but I'm kind of proud of, like, here's the 40, something about, like, look how hard I tried to get better. Like, somehow maybe it legitimizes my condition more or something. Like, I did all of this, but you have me beat by a long shot, I think. I'm curious about so many of them, but if the last two that you mentioned, the ayahuasca and then with Dr. Joe Dispenza, that maybe start with the ayahuasca. What did that look like, and did it help?
I guess going back a couple of years, when I started to look down more of the holistic route, I started to look at meditation and how that could help me. And I didn't really take to it too well. However, it started to expose me to a different world. Then I started to look at breath work. I started to look at energy healing, and every single time I went and did one of these things, Wim Hof retreats. That was another thing that I didn't mention. I've been on a couple of Wim Hof retreats as well. But, and by the way, I'm not saying all of these things were really bad. And in fact, a lot of them actually were just, I guess, leading me to another thing that I needed to be exposed to. And the Wim Hof stuff I absolutely love. I think it's amazing. And basically, every time I would go down and these routes and meet new people, they would start to talk about things I'd never heard about. So I'd read a book that they'd recommended, and I'd listen to a podcast. And anyone who starts to venture down this kind of more spiritual route, you're going to come across ayahuasca. It's inevitable. People just talk about it. And your initial thing is, I'd actually watched a documentary on it years ago, called Tribe. And this guy had gone into the middle of the jungle in Peru and done it, and scared the living crap out of me. And I was like, I'm never doing that. And then I would then just I then would speak to someone else and they would mention it, and then someone else and they would mention it. And they say with ayahuasca, you start to get called to do it. It starts to just come across your path like so many times. And that's what happened with me. And I made the decision that I was going to do it in 2020, but then obviously the pandemic hit, and obviously I couldn't do it. Made the decision that I wanted to go to Peru in January of this year, and then they stopped us leaving the country. But then that same retreat messaged me saying, look, we're having a retreat in Mexico. And I was going to be in Mexico 2 weeks before the retreat. So I thought, right, this is a sign, I need to go. And the reason why I wanted to do it is because I realized in recent years, like, how my mindset was contributing to keeping me ill and how it had got me ill in the first place. I feel like I have a very unhealthy belief that I couldn't recover, and that there was a huge thing on mindset. There's a lot of energy blockages. I've got a lot of masculine energy going on, and that's not a good thing. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. In fact, I need a lot more of a balance, and that ayahuasca really helps you tap into your emotions. And it did all of that. Honestly, I could speak for 2 hours about the whole experience. I did an hour-long podcast about it. And what I will say is that the stuff I experienced there just made you believe in so that anything is possible in your life. I had so many scary, terrifying experiences, but what ayahuasca does, it ties it up with a nice little bow at the end and teaches you a little lesson. And I came out of it it really helped me believe that I will get better, for one. It really helped me show me what I'd been doing to myself physically, and mentally, physically and mentally abusing myself. Again, that sounds extreme, but it showed me the ways in which I'd been doing that. And it's not a magic pill. Maybe for some people it is. It's not a magic pill. I'm not going to suddenly do that and I'm going to be better. But what it did do, it gave me the wake up call that I needed to now do this mindset work on a daily basis. And then leading into the Joe Dispenza stuff, I was in Bali just over a year ago, and I was speaking to this guy in this place that I was in, and I talked to him about my health issues, and he said, "You need to look into Joe Dispenza." Looked into him, got really excited about him, loved everything he was talking about. And, I need to go on one of his retreats. And then I kind of forgot about it because of the pandemic. And then I was out for my ayahuasca retreat. I was sitting in this cafe and this guy sat next to me and he just started speaking to me. And I said, I told him why I was out here. And I said, why are you out here? And he said, I've just been on a Joe Dispenza retreat. And I was like, wow, so interesting. That's what I really want to do. And it just so happened he's actually from a village next to me, from where I'm from, in the middle of the UK, both incredibly small villages. It's so unlikely that I'd be sitting next to someone, on the other side of the world in a global pandemic where we're not allowed to leave the country. And he just so happened to have just been on a Joe Dispenza retreat. So at that point, I realized I had to go on this retreat. And yeah, again, I could do like a 2-hour podcast on this, but the whole week it's about, tapping into the quantum field. And in the quantum field, there are endless, limitless realities of where anything is possible. And that if we're able to connect to that field and emotionally tap into what that reality would be like for me. So for example, me being healthy, me doing sport, and actually emotionally live that reality, then the more I do that and the more I can tap into that, actually it will start to draw my body into that reality. I probably haven't explained that very well, but everything he does is completely backed by science and backed by studies. He's a science guy. He's not, this yoga guy with a big beard. He's completely, legit and, very normal. And that, in fact, he actually takes the piss out of a lot of people, who talk about gluten-free and being dairy-free and avoiding drinking alcohol because, he believes you can control a lot of this stuff with your mind. So yeah, sorry, again, I rambled a lot, but those are the two big things that I've done recently. And I feel like they're two things that I want to continue to do. I'm now practicing his meditations on a daily basis. I'm going to do another ayahuasca retreat, probably by the end of the year, early next year. And I'm definitely going to go on another one of his retreats. And I'm doing all the physical work I need to do now to recover. I just need to get the mindset and the kind of emotional work stuff nailed, which I find incredibly difficult, but I'm trying.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this. And for people who aren't aware, Dr. Joe Dispenza, he himself years ago was doing a triathlon and he was run over by a car and he broke his spine in 8 places. And every specialist, I believe he was here in California, told him he needed, these complicated surgeries, infusing things to his spine, and he was going to have lifelong pain and limited mobility. But without that, he would be paralyzed. And, he just decided that, nope, something is telling me. He said no to all the surgeries, and he spent the next, 3 or 4 months laying in bed and doing many hours a day of, meditations and just mental rehearsing and, these things to harness that quantum field and the mind-body connection, and was back to work within, I think, 3 or 4 months full time. He healed himself, as my understanding of his story. I find him fascinating. So it's really amazing that you went to go do this. And I think I love his story and the work that he does, because I really hope that more and more people embrace the power of our thoughts, our mental health in terms of our health, and impact that our brain has on our body's function. And I still hear a lot. Just in my Facebook group the other day, someone was talking about a brain training program, and some of the comments were like, I don't get it. Doesn't this imply that this illness is all in our head? And, and I get how people have that feeling, but it's just so important to understand the power of our thoughts and the power of our brain. So, obviously his spine being broken in 8 places wasn't in his head. And because he healed it with his mind, it doesn't mean that he had imagined it. It just means that, our brains, our thoughts are incredibly powerful.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, the way I like to, it's not that it's in your head, it's that your thoughts actually create a physical reaction in your body. And for anyone disputing that, if you're ever, depending on what you're like with heights, if you're incredibly high height and you're looking over the edge and you look over, you have that sick feeling in your stomach, don't you? And you have like maybe a shiver down your spine. That's showing that there's a thought causing a reaction in your body. And that's exactly what is happening when you have a thought saying, you go, oh God, I hate my boss. But that thought is actually saying to your body, there's a tiger in the room and I need to get the hell out of here. I'm in danger. And the problem is the world we live in at the moment, we're constantly living in that state, and we overreact to so many different things. Well, in terms of our body, what our body believes it is, and that, we're not equipped to deal with that. And so, the brain, I have to say the brain retraining thing is like a really difficult thing for me. Like I tried to do the Gupta program, and I know it can work for a lot of people, but the Joe Dispenza stuff for me is a lot more practical. But he's like, look, this isn't easy. You've got to work at it. And he says doing the work, and it's just as cheesy as it sounds, and it's going to take time. And the best thing, if anyone kind of, I guess, is skeptical, go on his YouTube and look at the testimonials and the transformation stories. Every condition you can think of, or not even condition, just like people just improving their lives. It's on there. So it's I'm glad you love it as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. So I'm just wondering, if you had to summarize what you think of all these things that you've tried so far, all the changes you've made, the new habits you have, what would be the things that you think have helped you so far the most?
That is a good question. I think physically, it's difficult to know which ones have helped me the most, because I've actually never been the most physically sensitive person, in that things don't seem to like, you hear about these people who will have like a slice of bread and they'll be in bed for a week. I've never been that kind of person that's been negatively reacting to stuff like that. I'll just wake up one day and I'll feel loads worse than I did the day before, and I don't know why. And in the same way, I don't do a protocol and then immediately feel amazing and then have a crash. So it's difficult. I think for me, the best things I've done have been the stuff that's been working on my mindset. The Wim Hof retreats, amazing. I love them. The ayahuasca retreat, again, amazing. And the Joe Dispenza retreat, I struggled all week. I didn't have an amazing time in the sense that I had this huge transformation, but I had an amazing time in the energy there and the transformations of other people that were going around me, and the little bit of like transformation that I had in that week was enough that it will set me up for my actual full recovery. And
you mentioned the Wim Hof program. Can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So he's a crazy Dutch guy. He does this, it's this breath work, which can actually get you into, almost like a psychedelic state. Like you can create, because DMT can naturally, release in the brain. And if you do it enough and intensely enough, he calls it, you get high on your own supply, you get high on your own breath, and it upregulates your immune system. It helps with depression. It helps with your, as I said, autoimmune issues. And so he does this breathing technique. And then he also does cold exposure. So ice baths, cold showers, all of that kind of thing. And it's that combination. And I've always really struggled with meditation. But then when I did this, immediately I struck a chord. And actually the first breath work I did was when I was in Guatemala. I was seeing my brother there, and I did work with this woman who's like an energy healer, but she got me to do this breath work. And afterwards I was lying there, and for the first time since I started to develop health issues, I didn't care about them. I actually didn't care. If someone said to me right now, would you want to get rid of it? I just wouldn't have cared. And I think I was able to tap into something there that Joe Dispenza talks about, because he says the minute you are so in love with life and you're so happy and joyous with life, and you don't care about what you've got going on, that's the minute that you'll probably recover, because you're so content and happy with what you've got going on. You're in that reality, and your body releases, and you're fine.
Oh, that's really interesting. No, thanks for explaining that. Yeah. So now you yourself do a lot of work, sharing other people's stories. And what prompted you to start doing that, and tell people a bit about what it is that you are doing right now with your podcast and YouTube channel and so forth?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I get to plug it a little bit. I was actually on a retreat just before the pandemic hit. My brother lives out in Bali, and I went out there to do this retreat. Again, sorry, this was something else I hadn't mentioned. It was another retreat. But this was all about finding your life's purpose, and it sounds quite cheesy, but it was all about finding your life's purpose and living in more alignment with your purpose. And I came to the realization over that week that I wanted to find more reason and more purpose in what I'd been going through, and that I wanted to help people that had been in my situation and that were in my situation. And over the previous year, I'd started to work a lot more on my mindset, and I'd also just I'd stopped going on Google. I'd stopped going on these Facebook groups, and I'd actually sought out people who'd recovered and people who were doing amazing things with their lives. And it made me feel a lot better. It started to add to my belief that I could recover and I could get better. So I thought, well, could I create a business where I create like a one-stop shop for people to come and get better. And then I was like, oh, no, I'm already doing a lot. I've started my own business. I know I need to do something that's going to have the maximum impact, but I don't have to commit loads of time to it, so that, I maybe won't, would drop it after a few months. And then I realized a podcast, that would be a really good idea. And I could just interview people. And it's what I talked about before. There's a lot of places on the internet you can go to feed off negativity. There's not many places you can go and feed off positivity. And when you type in Google all of your symptoms, there should be a sponsored ad that comes up that's a positive ad. There shouldn't be all of these negative things. There should be a thing that comes up that's just, no, you can recover. And that should be a thing. Someone from Google's watching, put that on.
And Google's saying, if someone's watching and wants to pay us to, we will be happy to.
Exactly. But unfortunately people pay attention to, that's why the media is driven, they put out the negative, things out there. And, but anyway, I wanted, a safe place for people to come and only hear inspiring stories. I remember hearing a podcast, and I was in such not depressed. I wasn't depressed, but I was in such a low state that day, not believing in my own recovery. And I listened to this guy, and it immediately changed my day around. I felt amazing, and just the power of his story turned that around for me. And I was like, if I could do that for just one person every episode, that would be enough. And so that was it. Yeah, we started last September, and I was putting out one episode a week, and I was doing it all myself. And I took a break in February because I was going to do this ayahuasca retreat and wanted to focus on that. And one of the things that came through in the ayahuasca retreat, and which is what happens with ayahuasca, it forces you to focus on what's truly important. And I got the message that, I got the intuition that I needed to double down on this. So I came through and I said, right, I need to hire someone to take all of the crap off my plate, and I just want to record. And so I've got this awesome guy that I told Raelan about, and she's hopefully gonna have him as well, but to help do all of the stuff that I don't want to do with my podcast, and I just get to record and just focus on that. And I want to put out 2 a week. I don't want to put out 1 a week. And so I came back, eyes on the prize, and I've recorded a lot, and we're now putting out 2 a week. And yeah, it just it reinforces my decision to do it. Whenever I get a message, I got a message this morning of someone saying, it really turned their week around. And these aren't my stories. I'm not talking on them, although I'm talking a lot now. These are other people's stories that are inspiring me. It's therapy for me, and it's amazing for me. So, I love doing it.
That is amazing. It's so, I'm sure you hear this all the time. And the more people I talk to, the more I hear is just like, oh, it's so nice to come across something optimistic and hopeful, because there's just so much doom and gloom out there. So I'm just so grateful to you and all the people like you, because it seems like more and more now people are doing this. So hopefully we can start to flood the internet with the recovery stories and the good stories, so that when people come into this, they're not smacked in the face with this immediate hopelessness and feeling like they're just never going to get past it. With your podcast, what is your focus on specific illnesses, or who do you interview?
No, I would interview, I was about to say I'll interview anyone. I'll interview anyone who, I guess, who's overcome something. I've had all kinds of condition, chronic fatigue, Crohn's disease, MS, all kinds of conditions. For me, it's that's why I actually share these episodes in Facebook chronic health groups, and sometimes I get a bit of pushback because someone will say, well, that person doesn't have MS. And for me, it's not about that. Like we're all going through the same thing mentally. We're going through different things physically, but mentally we're all going through the same thing. So the podcast isn't how to get better, because what works for you won't work for me. But what worked for you, what is a common theme throughout all of them, is the mindset that these people use to get better. Not one of the people that I've interviewed just took a pill and got better whilst not addressing their mindset. So yeah, it's really, really important, that side of it.
Well, Phil, as always, I could keep you here talking all day. I say this every time, but it's true, because it's so fascinating, and I just want to pick your brain, and everything you've shared. I've had 100 follow-up questions, but I'm trying to restrain myself a little bit. But as we kind of wrap up here, I'd love to know, I like ending, just finding out, what are some of the biggest things that you've taken away from all of this, or what advice would you have for other people that are currently facing these types of chronic health challenges?
There's a lot. I actually I put out a post on my Instagram recently, like five reasons why chronic illness would be the best thing that ever happened to me. And so I think there's a couple of things. First of all, like trying to focus on things that are good that have come as a result. I couldn't see it a few years ago, but I was forced to stop doing things like drinking and doing all of these things that I thought were a lot of fun, but they're actually really harmful to me, harmful to my health, my mental health, my physical health. And although now I still yearn for those times, sometimes I don't yearn for the Sundays where I felt, horrific and, created so many bad habits. And as a result of my, it forced me to leave my job, forced me to start my own company. It forced me to do this podcast. So many things in my life now are better as a result. So even if you can think of one tiny thing that has happened as a result of your chronic health issue, I would just urge you to focus on that. It can be something small as, I don't eat gluten anymore. And I know that's tiny, but that could be just a positive thing. And as time goes on, it's just it's a muscle that you start to, you train, and you start to look for the things that are positive that are going on in your life. The other things that I've realized is like trying not to do everything in one go, and that it's okay to make incremental steps forward. And that actually, if you look back a year ago, you've come so far. I know physically maybe that's not a case for me, but actually I think if I'd been carried on going the way I was, I'd be so much worse than what I am right now. And I'm lucky. I'm still able to live a relatively normal life. There's some things I'm not able to do, but compared to a lot of others, I'm lucky. And I think I wouldn't have been like that had I not addressed things earlier and paid attention to like the incremental changes. The other things that I've learned how resilient I am. What is there that I can't achieve now? Like having been through this, what is there that I can't deal with? there's not much because of what I'm going through right now. There will be more difficult things, I'm sure, that will come up in my life, but as a result, I'm so resilient because of going through this. Another few things like self-improvement. I used to laugh at people when they would say like self-improvement and, personal development. And, one of my friends started to take up Spanish once, and I started to make fun of him. And I was like, you're bettering yourself. What's wrong with you? Just be happy with your own little comfort zone. But, once I've gone down, I've opened Pandora's box, and that's something that I can't stop now. I love the thought of being better. I love the thought of being better than I've ever been before. And, the goal used to be, I want to recover. Now it's, I want to feel better and be better than I've ever been before. And that's such an inspiring thought for me to think, and a motivating thought for me to think. Other things as well. I'm so much more open-minded, and I guess I'm just a better person. And I guess, to anyone who's listening to this, think about kind of how close-minded are you now to like things that could help you and could help you improve. I've been, if I'd have just realized a lot of this stuff earlier, that, the Joe Dispenza, the mindset stuff, I would be in a far more progressed place now. And so being an open-minded person makes you more approachable. It makes you more personable, and, draws more opportunities to you. And then finally, for me, a massive lesson that I've learned, that life is, again, I don't want to sound too cheesy, but life's a lot more magical than I ever thought it was. And, that's difficult to, difficult to force yourself to think sometimes. I don't want to, I don't want to constantly put out this positive message and deny the negative. I woke up this morning feeling like crap. It took me a couple of hours to get going. There was a lot of negativity, but what brought me out of it? It was the meditation I did with Joe Dispenza. It was like the mindset stuff I've done, and doing this stuff, doing all of this other work, you realize that life's not as mundane and boring and as, two-dimensional as we all think it is. It's a lot more magical, and there's so much more that you could get out of your life, and you don't need to wait for your illness to be over for you to get going. You can get going now. So yeah, there's a lot of lessons. There's probably more, but I would say that those are my main ones.
That is amazing. That was so incredibly well said. I see, this is why I do this, because I feel like I'm getting my own therapy session, my own coaching, because I leave these chats and I'm reminded of all of these things, because sometimes we forget, we have to relearn lessons, or we relapse a little bit, and so many things I'm like, yes.
Yeah, 100%. That's how I felt. That's how I felt when we recorded. I interviewed you. It is therapy. It's amazing, and that's why the content you're putting out there, and the episodes that I'm putting out there. Hopefully, people are tuning in and getting those same feelings as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always feel a little bit bad when, people, I imagine you get a bit of the same, like, wow, it's so good of you to be putting this out. You're amazing. And I'm thinking, we're all quite selfish creatures. We all typically do things because they're personally fulfilling or rewarding in some way. So, I'd love to say that I'm doing this all for, of course, there's a part of me that, just really wants to do this for other people, but I get so much out of it. And I find it helps keep me on track when you are continually talking about these things. It just keeps it in your mind of how you want to live your life, how you want to take care of yourself. And so much of what I heard from what, you were saying when you're taking away from this is just like what a lot of us seem to come out of this is like this new, zest for life, for lack of a better way of putting it. It's, for me, it's a mentality of, I look at things now like, instead of I have to do this, like I get to do this, things that I took for granted, I have more of an appreciation for, and I find more joy in things. So I'm glad to hear that you've taken so much away from this, because I think a lot of good can come from it.
100%.
Well, if people want to find you, if they want to, I think a lot of people, if they're not already listening to your podcast, I think they're going to want to start. If you're not are already watching his YouTube channel, it's just such a constant dose of, hope and inspiration, and just that fuel that we all need to just keep going. So where can they find your podcast, your YouTube channel, and so forth?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, and it's all The Chronic Comeback, all one word. So yeah, if you type into any of those platforms, look us up. Yeah, hit the subscribe button if you can. But yeah, look us up. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. Also, I'd love to hear the main, in fact, how I got you on the show was because someone who listens to the show recommended that I get in contact with you. And that's the best way of me getting guests. So, if anyone's listening to this and they've got an amazing story to tell, please get in contact. And yeah, I would love to speak to you.
Amazing. And this will all be in the video description as always. So you can take a look there, expand that, and you'll find links to, all of his social spaces and his podcast and so forth. So yeah, thank you so much. I know you're busy. I know you do a lot of your own interviews, Phil, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to do this today and chat with, my subscribers and the people who watch my videos. I'm sure they'll have taken a lot away from your story. And now they know, if they weren't already aware, where they can find more great content. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
No worries, and thank you so much for having me on. I hope I didn't bore everyone too much with my rambling, but yeah, thanks so much.
I seriously doubt that. If you enjoyed this, I've got many more stories just like this one. I'll link a playlist on the screen here that shares lots of, partial and full recovery stories, people coming back from all sorts of things. And yeah, thank you again, Phil. Thank you everyone who's watching. Looking forward to hearing your comments and thoughts in the video below. And that's it for today. I'll see you in the next video.